Welcome to History and Politics with Dr. Brovkin. Today, my dear friends, subscribers, and visitors to this channel, I'd like to continue with part 2 of my interview with a British audience, with a British interviewer, which was published a few days ago under the title, Who Loves Putin and Who Fears Him? So this first part was devoted primarily to Russian history or Soviet history. We discussed how the Soviet Union fell apart, what was the nature of the Soviet system, what were its good strengths or positive areas or weaknesses, and many other issues, but focus primarily was on President Putin and the way Russia changed under his stewardship. Now, today, part 2 will be the conversation focuses on Ukraine. A question arose as to the way the Russians perceive Ukraine, what it means to the Russians, the way the historical relationship shaped up, especially the painful period during World War II and the issues of collaboration and the issues of nationalism, and then the way the relationship shaped up after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And of course, we couldn't escape the eternal topic of the origins of the Ukraine war, how it came about, the Minsk Accords, Putin's policy, how he tried to find the compromise with Minsk Accords. And then finally, in this video, I discuss the question posed, how this war is going to end. So I guess the talk today could be titled, "The Ukraine War is Lost. Wake up, the West. The war is lost." And with this introduction, let me now move on to the main body of the interview. And please don't forget that I have several playlists, and recently I have started a audio podcast through rss.com, and it goes to Spotify and other things, and most of my videos are then translated into audio track and could be heard as well as watched. And of course, also, I invite you to check me in the Substack. The address will be in the description. So welcome to this channel and welcome to the interview.
Yeah, let's go. The recording started. Well, first of all, Professor, thank you very much for your availability and patience, and to making this time for this interview. As a first start, I'll start very easy with a very easy question. If you want to make a brief introduction of yourself, to give a bit of context in this interview. So please go ahead.
Well, right now I'm a retired professor of Russian history, and I live in France. But I lived in many countries. I was born what was called then the Soviet Union, and at the age of 22, I went to the United States, and I finished Georgetown University, Princeton University, became a doctor of philosophy, which means a professor of Russian history. And at the height of my career, I was associate professor of Russian history Soviet history at Harvard University.
Can I just jump back, in time, actually,
Yes.
To the, obviously there is on everyone to the Ukraine conflict. Can you just give a tiny bit of background on that one and where we are now? But more importantly, I like to focus towards the end, towards what's the worst and best case scenario for in your opinion. Thank you.
Well, one thing I should start with is that Ukraine is not foreign to Russia. I mean, you have to understand, it's kind of like Alsace to France. Try to tell the French that Alsace is not French. They would be appalled. I mean, they fought 2 wars to keep Alsace, even though Alsace actually speaks German. I was there recently and I went to the church, and people in the church spoke German, but they feel French, obviously. So Ukraine was a part of Russia for 400 years. And before that, it was a part of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, and Russia, which at that time was Belorussia, the part that the Poles owned, was speaking Russian and were Orthodox and considered themselves Russian. And before that, it was the Kievan Rus. This was the area from where Russia began, because it was the Duke of Kiev who moved to Moscow and moved the capital. So the Russians consider Russia and Ukraine one people. And then when the Soviet Union collapsed and the Ukraine became independent, they were okay with it. They made all kinds of compromises. They said that Crimea, which was actually Russian until 1954, a part of the Russian Soviet Socialist Federal Republic, as opposed to Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic, part of the Soviet Union. They said, okay, you can have it. It's okay. We can work it out. There was the Ukrainian constitution that said there would be open borders. They would be like European Union. There would be pensions paid no matter where you live, open borders, open trade, non not belonging to any military blocs, neutral status, friendship treaty. This was how it existed until 2014. I was many times when I was at that time traveling. I had a program in Ukraine and then Russia. Was going back and forth all the time. The border was open. Everything was just normal. But this is what was happening. In West Ukraine, this is the part that used to belong to Austria-Hungary. And then between the two world wars, it belonged to Poland. This is Lvov area. Now, there was a rising nationalism, and it goes back a long time. During World War II, the nationalist leader Bandera wrote a letter to Hitler saying that he's offering an alliance between Ukraine and Germany against the Bolsheviks and the Jews. And I have this letter. It's totally well-known fact. During World War II, these Bandera types, they were the Polizei, they were the collaborators, they were the ones killing the Jews for the Germans. They killed 200,000 Poles. And this is why today, a few days ago, when there was reburial of Melnik, one of those collaborators who participated in the killing of the Poles, the Polish government feel upset. They said many nasty things about Ukraine and Zelensky and about Melnik and about Nazi collaborators, because the Polish people remember 200,000 Poles murdered by these types. So what happened in 2014? Those who celebrate Bandera, they seized power by a coup d'etat. The agreement that Putin helped to the British and the French and the Germans and the Russians agreed that Yanukovych would resign and they would have elections by the end of the year. That was the deal in February 2014. The next day, they seized power and overthrew Yanukovych, who sought asylum in Russia. So it was a clear violation of the just agreed compromise that there would be new elections in Ukraine. They seized power and immediately banned Russian language and decided openly they are going to join NATO. As soon as they did that, Crimea and Donbass said no. And they sent a delegation to Russia and said, we are not going to be a part of that kind of Ukraine. And so this is where, the complications begin. Putin accepted Crimea, but he did not accept Donbass. And I remember these things very well, month by month. In spring 2015, there was a referendum in Donbass that voted to join Russia back. Well, Putin said yes, no, but, and then he started making the Minsk Accords that were signed again with the French and the British, the French and the Germans as co-signatories. The Minsk Accords were that Donbass would stay legally as part of Ukraine, but it would have open frontier with Russia, and it would have a special status, the way all of Ukraine used to be before the coup d'état. That was signed, and Putin was willing to play along. And for years, Putin repeated, there's no alternative to Minsk Accords. He said it over and over and over again, until the communists were saying to him, the opposition, come on, Putin, we have to defend Donbass. This is just impossible to wait any longer. And then the war started. And again, the West keeps repeating was Russian aggression, Russian aggression. This is nonsense. There was no Russian aggression. There was a decision of Russia to finally help Donbass defend itself. And then they asked to be joined into Russia. And after 10 years, the parliament finally said 8 years. Okay, fine. And they accepted it in spring 2022 into the Russian Federation. And even then, when the so-called aggression or war started in April 2022, when the Russian troops was just near Kiev and near Kharkov, again, there was another compromise, and it was an accord signed by the Ukrainian party in Istanbul, which essentially repeated Minsk Accords. Some people call it Minsk III. It was signed that the same thing, that Donbass would remain legally Ukrainian, but it would have open border. There would be neutral status, all kinds of things like this. Ukrainian armed forces reduced to 80,000. The story is since then that Boris Johnson, your British Boris Johnson, came to Kiev and said, we will help you no matter what it takes, however long it takes, keep on fighting. And Zelensky said, okay, well, in this case, we will keep fighting. And they keep fighting to the present day. And now the situation changed when Putin said, no, this is no longer going to be a Donbass under Ukrainian jurisdiction. It is going to be Russian, because these provinces wanted to join Russia, and they are Russian by Russian constitution. And this is where still are now fighting over Donbass.
Yeah, the last part of the question is the worst and the best case scenario going. I'd like you to make like a kind of a prediction based on obviously your knowledge.
Well, it's very hard to make a prediction. The only thing what I'm absolutely totally sure of is that Russia is going to win this conflict. This is 100%. There's no way it could end any other way, simply because the West does not have physical power, doesn't have enough missiles, doesn't have enough money, doesn't have enough will, doesn't have enough soldiers, anything to win over Russia. Russia is a military giant, especially now that the entire industry is turning, thousands and thousands of drones and missiles and tanks and airplanes, everything. Russia is stronger than combined NATO, even if there was a direct conflict, even without the use of nuclear weapons. So this is number one. Number two is how it is going to end. This is not clear because there are hawks in Russia and there are compromises. And I think Putin is a compromiser, and this is what he's often criticized for. My understanding is that Putin is ready to settle just for Donbass, just for the 4 provinces which he announced in June 2024, which is Donetsk, Lugansk, Zaporozhye, and Kherson, and Crimea. This is in terms of territory. And he is ready to stop just at that. But in return, what he would like is neutral status for Ukraine, no NATO membership in Ukraine, no foreign troops in Ukraine, and a treaty, not just ceasefire, a treaty, and lifting of sanctions. If he could get all this, then Russia will not move any further. But the West is doing everything to actually make Russia move further, because they're not ready for any of this. They still talk about Ukraine and NATO. They still want to place their troops in their just recent meeting in Downing Street, where they say as soon as there's ceasefire, there will be security guarantees and Western troops are going to be placed in Russia. Russian answers no. There will not be any Western troops in Ukraine. If they come, they will be destroyed. So the way the West is acting up now is actually pushing Russia to occupy more of Ukraine. If they continue on this road, then all of Ukraine will be controlled by Russian troops sooner or later. But that's not what Putin wants. And he is in control. He wants a compromise. He wants a negotiated settlement with the lifting of sanctions and with international recognition of new borders. Now, if the West is not willing to play along, and it is not, obviously, by today's statements by major Western leaders, well, then the war will continue until Russian total control of Ukraine.
Okay, Professor. Now, normally at this stage, I would ask you to make like a concluding statement, bearing in mind that obviously your knowledge is very much, again, very much appreciated by all our audience, and possibly there will be a part two of this interview. But I like to, like, in a way, instead of making a conclusion, I like to play a game with you.
Yeah.
Now, let's say that you are Mr. Putin, and I'm one of those Russians that call up for the 4 hours, something for the ticket, and so on and so forth. Instead of talking about the ticket, I will ask him very simply. Now, if you look at the conflict in Iran, Iran didn't spare any neighbors of his, basically. So you attack me, I attack you on all the bases and with no mercy. You try to kill my leaders, okay, I'll go after yours. Right or wrong, that's what they've done. And right or wrong, in my view, as a simple Russian man, let's call it, they are way ahead on the compromise, on the resolution of the conflict, rather than Russia. Obviously, with the Strait of Hormuz, effectively under the complete control. Now, Russia, at the same time, looks to me as Putin is very unwilling, very reluctant, or he will not do it. He will not hit the basis of NATO, which effectively they guarantee the survival of Ukraine as a state and as an army, in Poland, in Italy. Yeah, he made a list in UK and something. So he keeps repeating, okay, these are the targets. Stop, providing drones, etc. So, what would you respond if you were Putin to the Russian man? They ask you this question: why did they are the Iranian, they are way ahead on resolution of the conflict, because they can understand that clearly the problem is not Ukraine, is NATO. Yeah. So please go ahead, Professor. I don't know if
Yeah.
my question is clear to you.
No, the question is clear, and I don't know whether I should speak as Putin would or to
Well, try,
interpret.
or
Well,
speak as a
Putin,
professor, whatever, basically. But
I would say
let's
as a
try to
professor, because
find a.
Putin would say what he already said. He was asked that question many times, and he said, if Russia is attacked directly from the territory of a NATO country, it will be hit back. Now, if there's evidence that a drone flew from Estonia or from Poland, the place where it flew from will be hit. This is absolutely no question about it. And if the West provides the missiles that are hitting Russia, they will be destroyed, and they are. In the latest hit on Kiev, the Firepoint missiles provided by the British and rebranded as Ukrainian, even though everybody knows these are British missiles, this factory has been destroyed. So what Putin is accused a lot of times of being weak and is not acting as decisively in Iran, the answer is very simple. Iran does not care about good relations with the rest of the world, with NATO countries, with US, and with Israel. He knows that the Israeli elites hate them, Iranians, no matter what they do. This is an enemy, and the United States is an enemy too. And in that sense, its hands are free. It's fighting for survival, and it would use anything it has in order to defeat the enemy militarily and make it impossible for the United States to continue the war. This is what they're doing, and it's a dangerous strategy, because just a couple of days ago, Trump was, discussing a nuclear hit on Iran. Now, Russia is in a totally different situation. Russia is confident, and Russia knows that if push comes to shove, it can destroy Europe in 10 minutes, all of it. That's it. But that'll be the end of civilization. And they don't want to do that. They want to find a gentlemanly compromise so that, like in most history of Europe, after there's a war, the defeated party signs a peace treaty, just like it happened many, many times in a Prussian-French war. The French were defeated and they signed the treaty, and Alsace became German. And throughout European history, the country that loses cedes territory or some other things, and then there's a peace. And this is what Putin hopes. He wants to demonstrate to the West that they lost in Ukraine. No matter what they do, sooner or later they will have to admit that they lost. If they don't admit, and if they're going to keep shooting, well, then at one point or another, Russia will shoot back. But not at this point. At this point, Putin wants to be seen as a reasonable leader. And what he cares about is to be respected by the rest of the world, by BRICS countries, by China, by India. And this is why he doesn't want any civilian casualties. He doesn't want to come across as an aggressor. He wants to settle it as a compromise. The West doesn't want to. The West wants to provoke him more and more. Well, the West is going to get back, whatever, however much they continue. If at one point there is something flying into Russia from British territory, Britain will be hit. This is no question about it. So it's a dangerous game that the West is playing by provoking Russia more and more. What they refuse to understand, because of their pride, is that Russia is stronger and it can deliver a devastating blow to all of NATO countries combined in 10 minutes. But they just are not ready to accept that reality, and they keep arming Ukraine, and Ukraine keeps fighting, and there are fewer and fewer soldiers, and every day Russian army advances. It advances slowly, and people say Putin is weak. No, it advances slowly because Ukrainians will be Russian citizens. This is Donbass. As soon as Russian army comes, they become citizens. They get Russian passports. These are Russian people, and you don't want to just scorched earth policy of blowing up everything that there's nothing left. So this is why the war is going slowly, carefully, with limited casualties for civilian population, sparing the life of every Russian soldier. And it is difficult because there are drones flying all the time. And this is why it's going slowly, but it is inevitably going to Russian victory. That's the way I see it.
Thank you, Professor. I'm going to stop the recording now.